What's going on, guys? So Islam Makhachev has been hinting and chattering about moving up to not just welterweight, but middleweight to possibly face Dricus Du Plessis, and Dricus Du Plessis is welcoming the idea. Now, I know the easy go-to here is, oh, Dana's never going to do that, but I disagree because there is a first time for everything, and every time a barrier is broken and an envelope is pushed, the sport as a whole raises its game, and at one point, there was no one that had achieved double champ status for the UFC. Now, to this date, we've had a total of 9 UFC double champs, meaning people who either held 2 belts both at the same time or had won 2 belts in 2 different weight divisions. Okay, so I see there being a first time for everything. So, Dana's only response really in public about this has been, I don't know about that, but I'm sure he probably said that when he was first presented with Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match as well. You know what I mean? If the money is right and the timing is right when you have the exact right champions in any given time, I think that could make for a huge fight. Dricus Du Plessis, a global superstar in middleweight right now. Islam Makhachev, a global superstar at lightweight right now. If these two were to get into the octagon together, I see the numbers being astronomical. I mean, we are going to have to bring back Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking to do the mathematics on how big this would be. And listen, you're not only talking about 2 of the most dominant UFC champions in recent history, you're also talking about the fact that there's so many question marks, there's so many what ifs. The main thing that people will want to know is, wow, does weight really matter that much? Because if you start talking about skill for skill, you could kind of get to a point in the conversation pretty quickly where people will say, yeah, I believe, Islam's skills are just as good, if not better, than Dricus. I definitely believe his ground game potentially, could be even better, given that he's from that Dagestani and Magomedov camp, right? So you could get there as far as skills go pretty quickly. But then the conversation starts to take a different turn when you start talking about the size of these 2 athletes. The fact that Islam may easily walk around at 185, 190 when he's not fighting, but fighting there is quite different because on the flip side of that same coin, you also have to assume that Dricus Du Plessis is probably walking around at 220. Imagine he probably tries to keep his weight within striking distance a little more than that, maybe a little more like 215. So, but still, you're talking about a walking around weight of 30 pounds difference on these 2 guys. So when you look at this from a logical perspective, it would answer so many questions, and it would also educate the fans, because I can tell you, you have to go back to as early as 1993, 1994 in the Hoist Gracie days to find a time where a person's body weight and size really didn't matter. And the reason that is because the levels of their skill sets were so different. Here comes this professional jiu-jitsu guy, and then the rest of the guys in the field didn't know anything about his martial art. So it was completely a professional fighting novices. Hence the reason a 176-pound Hoist Gracie was able to defeat 210, 215, 220-pound, even 230-pound wrestlers. You get my drift? This day and age, as much as the sport has evolved and the way people are cross-trained in all different disciplines, weight is going to matter a lot more these days because you don't have a Hoist Gracie who knows everything and a Dan Severn who knows absolutely nothing about jiu-jitsu and submission, right? You have Islam Makhachev, which he may be somewhat better as far as his submission game and his sambo grappling game than someone like Dricus Du Plessis. I mean, we can all fairly assume that, considering the camp that he comes from, but it is not going to be enough better where he's going to be able to make up for the size difference, the strength difference, right? And I think this would be a fight that would not only do huge, massive pay-per-view numbers, but it would educate the fans. And I think it's something that the fans would sign on for and say, hey, I'd be curious about that, to see what really happens there. I mean, does weight really matter? I mean, could Islam Makhachev, being a guy that walks around 20, 30 pounds lighter than Dricus Du Plessis, really come up there and his skills are so much more refined that he's able to finish someone like Dricus Du Plessis? But then you have the other side of the field where people are going to say, I don't care how much better he is. Dricus Du Plessis, you can tell by looking at the two, he has to be a much bigger, stronger athlete. Would Islam Makhachev's elevated skill level be enough to close that gap? And I remember they asked Dricus about this, and he basically said, I would just power out of it. And listen, when I took jiu-jitsu back in the day, there were times where, when I first started training, I was a white belt. And, there was a lady who was a local cop that trained at my gym. She was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, right? And there were several times that I was paired with her to grapple. And listen, obviously, the skill level between myself and her was quite different. I was a white belt. She was a black belt, had been training for quite a few years. So everything she tried, I was just able to just muscle out of it and pull out of it because I was so much bigger and so much stronger than she was, right? And I had similar sort of circumstances with younger male athletes. I remember being a white belt and grappling with guys who were purple belts at the time when I was a white belt. But, we're talking 15, 16-year-old kids. And at that time, I was a 25, 26-year-old grown man. So I had a huge strength advantage. Same thing. They never could submit me because I was just so much stronger than they were. Okay. But you're also talking about two grown men here. So you're not talking about a woman versus a man. You're not talking about a 14-year-old boy versus a grown 26-year-old man. You're talking about two grown men, albeit different sizes, different weights, but still two grown men. Listen, I like to dream about stuff, and I'm telling you, there is a first time for everything. And I know Islam wants to get double gold up at 170 as well, but there's a little bit of a stinker throwing a monkey wrench in that right now, and that's the name Bilal Muhammad. They're close friends. They're training partners. They want to try to scurry around that interaction, Bilal and Islam, if they can. I know Islam has said that he would be willing to fight Bilal if push came to shove, but I still believe that based on Khabib's influence, I believe they're going to try to scurry around that fight if possible. Well, what could happen in the meantime? DDP has welcomed the idea of bringing Islam up to middleweight. I think the fans would be interested just out of morbid curiosity, and they're close enough in weight, and Islam's skills are to a point where it wouldn't be a walkover. I can't sit and say that Dricus Du Plessis will completely dominate Islam Makhachev. Now, listen, if they were both the same size, I'm giving that fight to Islam 9 times out of 10. Nothing against Dricus Du Plessis, but when you talk about the ground attack of Islam Makhachev, there's just no one in the UFC that you can put over him as far as skill level, right? These guys are just on another level. We've known this, right? But all things are not the same. Their weights are not the same. Their sizes are not the same. Their bone density is not the same. Dricus is just a naturally bigger, stronger athlete. What do you guys think? Would he be able to power out of everything that Islam Makhachev threw at him? Or do you think that Islam Makhachev would actually have a chance of winning that fight? My personal thoughts are that he would not be able to finish Dricus Du Plessis. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Dricus would finish Islam either, because I know he's very, very crafty on the ground. And I think as far as their stand up, I think it will be relatively even. Obviously Dricus may carry more knockout power, but I think the striking of Islam is actually cleaner, more crisp. He obviously would probably have a speed advantage, but if you're not big enough and strong enough to knock a guy out, and you got a guy that's used to taking hits from people who are 200 plus pounds, you can hit him all you want. It's not going to knock him out. What do you guys think? Do you think this is something that is feasible? Remember, when you're answering this, remember that there is a first time for everything. Okay? And you notice Dana said, I don't know about that. You notice he didn't say, no, that's never happening. When they asked him about the Conor McGregor-Logan Paul fight, he simply said, no, that's not going to happen. He didn't say that about the Islam-Dricus fight. Okay, so I think this is something that if Dricus and Islam keep pushing for this, I think that this could actually happen. And I'm telling you, we live in a world of morbid curiosity, and there are a lot of fans, casual and hardcore, that would be curious to see how that fight would play out. I would be curious to see how that fight would play out. How do you think that fight would play out between Dricus and Islam? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.